Hi guys, it's Grammy here. Dingoes at Dinner Time by Mary Pope Osborne. Dingoes. Hmm, Looks like a kangaroo to me. So let's find out what's happening with Jack and Annie. Okay, The Last Gift, Chapter 1. Annie sat on the porch steps. She stared down the street at the Frog Creek woods. Hey, Jack, do you hear it? She said. Jack sat next to her. He was reading a book. Hear what? Teddy's calling us, said Annie. You're kidding, said Jack. But he looked down the street and listened. A faint bark came from the distance. A big smile crossed Jack's face. You hear it, said Annie. Yep, you're right, said Jack. Time to go. He stood up and grabbed his backpack. Be back soon, Annie shouted through the screen door. Don't be late for dinner, their dad called. We won't, said Jack. He and Annie ran down the street and into the Frog Creek woods. Soon they came to the tallest oak. There was the magic treehouse. A little black nose stuck out the window. Hi, silly, Annie called. We're coming. Arf! Came a happy bark. Annie grabbed the rope ladder and started climbing. Jack followed her up into the treehouse. A small dog sat in a circle of afternoon sunlight. His tail wagged. Hey, Teddy, said Jack. Jack and Annie hugged Teddy, and the dog licked both of them. Morgan's note is still here, said Annie. Yep, said Jack. He knew the note by heart now. This little dog is under a spell and needs your help. To free him, you must be given 4 special things. A gift from a ship lost at sea, a gift from the prairie blue, a gift from the forest far away, a gift from a kangaroo. Be wise, be brave, be careful. Morgan. Beside the note, there were the gifts from their first 3 trips. A pocket watch from the Titanic, an eagle's feather from the prairie skies, and a lotus flower from the forest in India. We just need to get a gift from a kangaroo, said Annie, and Teddy will be free from his spell. We must be going to Australia, said Jack. That's where kangaroos live. Cool, said Annie. Teddy whined and scratched at a book lying in the corner. Jack picked it up. What'd I tell you? He said. He showed the cover to Annie. The title was Adventure in Australia. Great, said Annie. She looked at Teddy. Ready to meet a kangaroo? Arf, arf. Jack opened the book. He found a page with small pictures of different animals and a big picture of a forest. Jack pointed at the forest. I wish we could go there, he said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 2. Sleepyhead. Jack opened his eyes. Glaring hot sunlight flooded into the treehouse. Neat hats, said Annie. She and Jack were both wearing hats. I think they're going to protect us from this sun, said Jack. He and Annie looked out the window. Teddy looked out too. The treehouse had landed in a scrubby forest filled with droopy plants and dry brown trees. Man, this place needs rain, said Jack. He sat back on his heels and he looked at the picture of where they had landed in Australia. From the book he read, Australia's forests go through times of drought. A drought is a long period of time without any rain. The same forest can be flooded by heavy rains at other times of the year. Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, drought equals no rain. Hey, Jack, said Annie. Doesn't it smell like a cookout? Jack sniffed the air. It did smell like a cookout. Jack looked out the window. A wisp of smoke floated above some trees in the distance. Maybe there are people camping over there. Let's go see, said Annie. Jack put his notebook and the Australia book into his backpack. Put Teddy in there too, said Annie. Jack slipped the little dog into the pack. Then he followed Annie down the ladder. When they stepped off onto the ground, the hot wind nearly blew their hats off. The campers must be over there, said Annie. There they are. She pointed to the smoke in the sky. They started walking across the sun-baked clearing. They passed bushes and scrawny trees. Lizards ran over dry, cracked ground. Oh, oh, oh. Teddy was barking from Jack's pack. Whoa, said Jack. A pair of huge, funny-looking birds walked out from behind a bush. They were taller than Jack. They had fat bodies and long, skinny legs and long, skinny necks. Who are you? Annie asked the strange pair. Jack opened his pack and took out the Australia book. He found a picture of the bird. They're emus, he said. He read aloud. The emu is a large bird that doesn't fly. It can run as fast as 30 miles per hour. Wow, that's fast, said Annie. Arf! Teddy jumped out of Jack's backpack and barked at the strange birds. The emus gave the little dogs a haughty look, and they turned and walked proudly away. Jack wrote in his notebook, emus, proud birds, don't fly. Look, a live teddy bear, said Annie. Jack looked up and Annie ran to the tree at the edge of the clearing. The live teddy bear was nestled into the fork of a tree. Ah, so cute, whispered Annie. The creature was fast asleep. He had large round ears, a black nose, and a furry body. His feet had long, curved claws. That's a koala bear, said Jack. Hi, sleepyhead, Annie said to the koala. She patted his soft fur and he opened his big eyes and looked calmly at her. Jack found a picture of the koala bear in the Australia book and he read, the koala is actually not a bear at all. It's a marsupial, like a kangaroo. A marsupial mother carries her babies in a stomach pouch. Hey, that's neat, said Annie. Jack kept reading. Koalas mostly eat the leaves of gum trees, so cutting down gum trees to clear land has hurt them. Wildfires are also a threat. Koalas are slow moving and can't escape the smoke and the flame. Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, wildfires are a threat to koalas. What's wrong, sleepyhead? Annie asked the koala. Don't you feel well? Don't worry, said Jack. Listen to this. He read more from the book. Koalas, like kangaroos, are active at night and sleep during the day when the sun is hot. The name koala means no drink because koalas rarely drink water. They get moisture from the leaves they eat. Jack licked his lips. His mouth felt dry. Speaking of water, I'm thirsty. Me too, said Annie. Teddy was panting as if he were thirsty also. Let's go find the campers, Jack said. Maybe they can give us some water. Jack put Teddy back into his pack. He tucked the book under his arm in case he needed to look something up. They began walking again. Suddenly, there was a loud, harsh cackle. Yikes, said Annie. What was that? Said Jack. Chapter 3. Bigfoot. The loud cry rang again through the dry air. Teddy barked. Annie and Jack turned around in the clearing. It was hard to tell where the sound was coming from. The terrible cackle came again. There, said Annie. She pointed at a bird in the gum tree. The bird had brown feathers and a large head with a long beak. It stared down at Jack and Annie. Then it let out another cackle. Weird, said Jack. He found the bird in his book and read, Kookaburra is the best known bird of Australia. There's even a popular song about it. The kookaburra is also called a laughing donkey because the strange sound it makes reminds people of a braying donkey. I know that song, said Annie. She began singing. Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree, Merry, merry king of the bushes, he. Jack wrote in his yearbook, Kookaburra, a big kook. Annie stopped singing. Hey, there's another weird thing. Where? Asked Jack. Annie pointed to a big bluish tan lump lying in a shallow, dusty hole. Is it alive? Asked Jack. They stepped closer to the big lump. It looks like it's breathing, said Annie. The lump was an animal lying on its back. Its paws were crossed over its chest. It had huge feet, large ears, and a face like a deer's, and a very long tail. It also had a very fat stomach. Just then, a small head peered out of its stomach. Whoa, said Jack. Oh, wow, it's a kangaroo with her baby still in her pouch, said Annie. Great, said Jack. Remember, we have to get a gift from a kangaroo. Their voices woke the kangaroo. The animal jumped up from her shallow bed. She glared at Jack and Annie. Her baby peeked its head out of her pouch. The mother kangaroo gave an angry stamp. Oh, we're sorry, said Annie. We didn't mean to wake you up. The kangaroo eyed Annie curiously. Then she took a giant hop toward her. Copying the kangaroo, Annie hopped toward the big animal. The kangaroo hopped. Annie hopped. The kangaroo and Annie began hopping around each other. They looked as if they were dancing. Jack couldn't believe how graceful the kangaroo was. She seemed to fly through the air and then land softly, like a butterfly. He looked up kangaroo in his book and read, The kangaroo is the most famous of the marsupials. The female carries her baby, known as a joey, in her pouch. Scientists call the kangaroos a macropod, which means Bigfoot. And the big feet help a kangaroo hop higher than any other animal in the world. With a running leap, a large kangaroo can jump over a school bus. Forget the hopping contest, Annie. She can out-hop you by a mile, Jack called. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, Kangaroo, Bigfoot, can jump over a school bus. The kangaroo began stamping her feet again. What's wrong? Said Annie. The kangaroo froze. Grrr, Teddy growled from Jack's backpack. Some nearby bushes moved. A moment later, 3 dogs crept silently into the clearing. They were sand-colored and mean-looking. Teddy growled once more. But the dogs crept toward the kangaroo. Suddenly, the mother kangaroo sprang into the air away from the dogs. The dogs chased after her. Stop! Cried Annie. Stop! Leave her alone! As the kangaroo jumped, she turned in midair and landed facing in a different direction. Then she zigzagged over rocks and bushes. Howling, the wild dogs raced after the kangaroo and her baby. Chapter 4. Joey. No, no, cried Annie. We have to save her. She took off after the dogs. Arf, 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 arf. Teddy barked over Jack's shoulder. Jack ran after Annie with the book under his arm. He ran over the dry, cracked earth, past scrubby brushes and scattered gum trees. Jack kept his eye on Annie, running just ahead of him. He saw her stop suddenly, and then she turned and dropped down to her knees. What happened? He shouted. Come look, she said. Jack reached Annie. Beside her in the grass was the baby kangaroo. It was trembling. Don't be scared, Annie was saying. Then she looked at Jack. Where's his mom? Why did she drop him? I don't know, said Jack. He put his pack on the ground and opened the Australia book. Teddy jumped out of the pack. The little dog tried to sniff the baby kangaroo. Don't scare him, Teddy, Annie said. Teddy sat back and watched politely. Jack opened the Australia book and found a picture of a baby kangaroo. He read, The biggest enemy of the kangaroo is the dingo, the wild dog of Australia. When a mother kangaroo is chased by dingoes, she may throw her joey out of her pouch. Without the extra weight in her pouch, she can leap faster and farther. She leads the dingoes away from her baby. If she escapes, she returns to the Joey. Oh, Jack, said Annie sadly. I hope his mother escapes from the dingoes. Me too, said Jack. Hi, Joey, said Annie. She gently patted the baby kangaroo. He's so soft, Jack. Jack knelt down and touched the brown fur. It was soft. It was the softest fur he'd ever felt. The shy little kangaroo stared at Jack with big brown eyes and trembled. Don't be scared, Joey, Annie said. Your mom's going to come back for you. Joey jumped away from Jack and Annie. He hopped towards Jack's pack, which was sitting on the ground. The baby kangaroo took a giant leap and dived headfirst into the pack. His whole body went inside, but his big feet stuck out. Then he turned himself over and peeked out at Jack and Annie. They both laughed. He thinks your pack is a pouch. I know, said Annie. Put it on backward. It will feel like his mom carrying him. Jack put his Australia book on the ground, and then Annie helped him put the pack on his chest instead of his back. But Joey was heavy. There, Annie said. You look just like a mother kangaroo. Brother, said Jack. But he patted the baby's soft fur. Don't worry, he said to the Joey. You can stay here until your mom gets back. Here, Joey, do you want some grass to eat? Annie asked. She scooped up a handful of grass and gave it to the kangaroo. He munched the grass, keeping his big eyes on Annie. I hope his mom comes back soon, she said worriedly. Yeah, said Jack. He looked around at the dry forest. There was no sign of the mother kangaroo. But Jack saw something else. Look, he said to Annie. The wisp of smoke in the sky had turned into a big black cloud. Jack noticed the smell of burning wood was getting much stronger. What are those campers doing? Said Annie. Are they making a bonfire now? Or what? A feeling of dread came over Jack. What if, in the distance, a tree suddenly burst into flames? We're looking at a wildfire, he said. Chapter 5, Wildfire. Wildfire? Said Annie. The woods were so dry. Everything's starting to burn, said Jack. We have to get out of here. But we can't leave Joey, said Annie. We'll take him with us, said Jack. But if his mom comes back for him and he's not here? We have no choice, said Jack. Just then, a kookaburra flew through the sky, cackling. The emus raced by at top speed. The air was getting smokier and smokier. The fire was spreading quickly. Come on, said Jack. We have to get back to the treehouse before it burns down. Which way's the treehouse? Said Annie. I'm not sure, said Jack. Smoke hid the treetops, and Jack's eyes stung. Forget it, said Jack. Let's just get away from this smoke. Come on. Jack and Teddy turned to go. The baby kangaroo hid his head inside Jack's pack. I'll catch up, said Annie. I have to get something. What? Cried Jack. But Annie dashed off in the other direction. Come back, Annie, Jack shouted. Branches cracked and fell from the trees. Smoke billowed everywhere. Arf, 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 arf. Annie, Jack cried. Jack choked on the smoke. He coughed and rubbed his eyes. The air was getting hotter. He had no choice. He had to run. Arf, arf! Teddy barked from somewhere up ahead. Hurry, Annie! Jack called helplessly. Then he took off after Teddy. He stumbled blindly through the brush. All he could do was follow the sound of Teddy's barking. His pack felt heavier and heavier. He held it up with his arms and he kept going. Suddenly, Jack heard Annie calling him. Jack stopped. Here, here, here! We're here! He shouted. Come on, follow us! Annie appeared through the haze of the hot smoke. She was coughing and tears streamed from her eyes. She was carrying the koala. Come on, Jack cried. Follow Teddy. Arf, arf! Jack and Annie carried Joey and the koala. They followed Teddy's barking through the smoky, fire-filled forest. Finally, they came to a giant rock. Arf, arf! Teddy was standing on a ledge. Behind him was the mouth of a cave. Through the smoke, Jack could barely see the little dog. Teddy barked again and then vanished inside the cave. Follow him, said Annie. Chapter 6, Hand to Hand. Jack and Annie climbed onto the rock ledge and then stepped into the cave. The air inside was cleaner and cooler than the air outside. I can't see anything, said Jack. He patted the head of the baby kangaroo. Me either, said Annie. Arf, arf! I guess we just have to follow Teddy's bark, said Annie. Let's hold hands. She held out her free hand to Jack, and Jack took it. He put his other hand out and touched the wall. The joey moved in his pack. Annie and Jack walked into the darkness. Arf! Teddy kept barking, leading them on. Arf! 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 Suddenly, Jack felt something thump against his leg. He stopped and gasped. What is it? Said Annie. Arf! It was Teddy. His tail was wagging and hitting Jack's leg. What is it, boy? Jack asked him. Teddy let out a howl. And as he howled, an amazing thing happened. A white line began to glow in the air. The line grew until it looked like a giant snake. Then glowing handprints appeared below the snake. Jack felt Annie squeeze his hand. I think it's painted onto the wall, she said. But what is it? Whispered Jack. I don't know, said Annie. She let go of Jack and put her hand inside one of the painted handprints. Jack did the same. Despite the glowing painting, the rock felt smooth and cool. It almost seemed to breathe. The ghost-like whistling sound came through the darkness, then a loud boom. What was that? Jack quickly took his hand off the wall. The boom came again. That sounded like thunder, said Annie. Arf, arf! Teddy's leaving, said Annie. She grabbed Jack's hand and they turned back the way they had come and followed Teddy's barking again. Arf! They followed Little Dog until they saw a flash of light. Lightning! Lightning and thunder! We're in front of the cave, said Annie. Yay! Annie pulled Jack toward the mouth of the cave and out into the pouring rain. Rain, rain, rain. Rain fell on Jack's head and on Joey's head. Rain fell on Annie's head and on Teddy's head and on the koala's head. Annie opened her mouth and drank in the rainwater. Jack did the same. The water tasted better than any water he had ever drunk. When Jack looked back at the woods, misty steam was rising from the charred ground and burning bushes. The heavy rain was putting out the wildfire. You'll be safe now, Annie said to the koala. I'll find you a nice gum tree. Then you can finish your nap. I see a tree that's not burned, said Jack. They walked over to the unburned gum tree. Annie placed the koala in the fork of two branches. Go back to sleep now, she said softly. Pretend the fire was all a dream. Good night, said Jack. The koala seemed to smile at them, and then he closed his eyes and went to sleep, as if he'd never been disturbed at all. Jack sighed and looked around. Man, we were lucky that storm came. Annie smiled. It wasn't just luck. It was magic. Magic? Yeah, the glowing hands and the snake. Somehow they brought the storm, said Annie. That doesn't make any sense, said Jack. The joey was stirring in his pack, and suddenly Jack remembered something. Hey, we have to get Joey back to the place where his mom left him, or she won't be able to find him. Well, where was the place? Asked Annie. I don't know, said Jack. He looked around at the gray, rainy forest. Everything looked the same. Teddy can find the spot, said Annie. Even without a bark, the little dog took off across the wet, muddy ground. Once again, Jack and Annie followed him. Jack's back was beginning to hurt from carrying Joey. Arf, arf! Jack and Annie caught up with Teddy. He stood over the Australia book. It was wet, but it wasn't burned. Hooray, we found it, said Annie. That's right, I left our book on the spot where we found Joey, said Jack. Once again, Teddy helped us out. She patted the little dog's head. Thanks, Teddy, said Jack. He picked up the Australia book. The cover was wet, but the pages looked okay. The little kangaroo peeked out of his pack as Jack tucked the book under his arm. Don't worry, Joey. We'll stay right here until your mom comes back for you. If she hasn't already come, Jack thought worriedly. Jack and Annie stood in the rain with Teddy and Joey and waited. They waited and waited. The rain turned to a drizzle, then the drizzle turned to a light sprinkle. Still, they waited. Jack grew sadder and sadder. Maybe the mother kangaroo had come and had left. Or maybe she'd been caught by the dingoes. Or maybe she'd been killed by the wildfire. Jack was afraid to look at Annie. Jack was afraid to say anything. I know what you're thinking, she said finally. Jack patted Joey's head and sighed. Let's wait a little longer. If she doesn't come back soon, we'll take him home with... Arf! Teddy barked softly. Listen, said Annie. Jack listened. The sound was very faint at first, but then it grew louder. It was a squishy sound. It was a squashy sound. It was the sound of big feet slapping through mud. Chapter 8. The Rainbow Serpent. The mother kangaroo bounded out of the trees. She landed 10 feet away from Jack, Annie, Teddy, and Joey. They were all still for a moment, as if they were all holding their breath. Then Joey tried to jump out of Jack's backpack. Hold on, said Jack. He put the pack down on the ground. The little kangaroo leapt out. He leapt again and then again and dived headfirst into his mother's pouch. Joey turned himself over inside the pouch and then he peeked out at Annie and Jack. Yay, said Jack and Annie together. They laughed and clapped with relief. He looks happy to be home, said Annie. His mother looks happy too, said Jack. The mother kangaroo was gazing down at her Joey. She patted his head with her small paws. Then she looked at Jack and Annie with soft eyes. She's saying thank you to us. You're welcome, said Jack. No problem, Annie told the kangaroo. You have a great Joey. Oops, sorry. The kangaroo gave a little nod, and then she bent over and used her front paw to pick up a small piece of bark from the wet grass. The kangaroo held the piece of bark out to Jack and Annie. Jack took it from her. Oh, man! It's our gift from a kangaroo. The kangaroo then sprang into the air. She bounded gracefully away through the charred forest. Thanks, called Jack. Bye, called Annie. Good luck. Arf, arf, Teddy barked. The rain stopped as Jack studied the piece of bark. There was a tiny painting on it. It looked just like the snake painting inside the cave. I wonder what the snake means, said Jack. Jack opened the wet cover of the Australia book. He looked around carefully at the damp pages. He found a picture of the snake painting. Listen, said Jack. He read. The first people of Australia are called Aborigines. They have lived there for 40,000 years. Their myths take place in a time they call dream time. In dream time, there's a rainbow serpent who sends life-giving rain. Aborigine artists paint the rainbow serpent on cave walls or on pieces of bark. In special ceremonies, they sometimes honor the rainbow serpent by painting their handprints on the magic snake. See, said Annie, that explains everything. Explains what? Said Jack. We put our hands on the painting of the rainbow serpent. It was like a special ceremony. So the rainbow serpent sent the rain to put out the wildfire. Arf! Teddy barked. Jack frowned. But it's not a real creature. It's dream time, not real time. Annie smiled. Then how do you explain that? She pointed at the sky. The rain clouds were gone. The sun had come back out. A rainbow curved across the blue Australian sky. Oh, man, whispered Jack. Though the air was warm, he shivered. Teddy led us to the painting. We should thank him, said Annie. How did he know about the rainbow serpent in the cave? I told you, Annie said. He has a touch of magic. They looked down at the little dog. Teddy tilted his head and seemed to smile. "Hey, we have all 4 gifts now," said Annie. "Oh, yeah," said Jack. "Let's go home and see if Teddy's spell is broken," said Annie. Arf, arf! Jack put the bark painting and the Australia book back in his pack. They all headed through the wet, steamy forest in the direction of the treehouse. I really hope the treehouse didn't get burned. They went past the clearing, past the gum trees, past the bushes. The treehouse was waiting for them. "It's still here," said Annie. She grabbed the rope ladder and started up. Jack put Teddy in his pack and followed. Inside the treehouse, Teddy wiggled out of the pack. He pawed the Pennsylvania book. "Arf, arf!" "Okay, okay," said Jack. He pointed at the picture of Frog Creek Woods. "I wish we could go there." "Over the rainbow," said Annie. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 9. What boy? "Welcome back," came a soft, lovely voice. Jack opened his eyes. It was Morgan. They hadn't seen Morgan in a long time. "Morgan!" cried Annie. She threw her arms around the enchantress. Jack jumped up and hugged Morgan too. "It's good to see you both," said Morgan. "Arf, arf!" "And it's good to see you too," Morgan said, smiling at the little dog. "Look," said Annie. She reached into Jack's pack and pulled out the piece of painted bark. "It's a gift from a kangaroo." "We have all 4 gifts now," said Jack. "Good work," said Morgan. She picked up their first gift. It was the pocket watch from the Titanic. "Once upon a time, there was a boy who wasted time," Morgan said. "This watch teaches him that time is very precious. It must be used wisely." Morgan picked up their second gift, the eagle's feather from the Lakota Indians. "Sometimes the boy was afraid to stand up for himself," she said. "The eagle's feather teaches him that a small creature can be one of the bravest." Morgan picked up the lotus flower from the forest of India. "Sometimes the boy did not respect nature," she said. "This flower teaches him that nature holds many wonders." Morgan picked up the piece of bark with the painting of the rainbow serpent. "Sometimes the boy didn't want to study other times and places. This painting teaches him that there is mystery, magic, and wisdom in the traditions of ancient peoples." "What boy?" Jack asked. "Who are you talking about?" asked Annie. Morgan didn't answer right away. She placed her hands on Jack's and Annie's shoulders. "Thank you," she said, "for helping this boy learn his lessons. Thank you for breaking the spell." "What boy?" Jack asked again. "Arf, arf, arf." Jack and Annie looked over at Teddy. Then something magical happened. In a flutter of time, in the spin of a whirlwind, Teddy was changed. He was no longer a dog. He was a boy. Dreamtime, Chapter 10. The boy was on the ground on his hands and knees. "Meet my young helper from Camelot," said Morgan. The boy glanced up. He had a friendly freckled face and twinkly dark eyes. His hair was the same color Teddy's fur had been. He looked a little bit older than Jack, about 10 or so. "Am I back?" he asked. "You're back," said Morgan. The boy leapt up and hugged her. "Thank you," he cried. "And I hope next time you'll ask before trying the spells in my spell book," said Morgan. The boy grinned sheepishly. "I promise." Then he looked at Jack and Annie. "I accidentally changed myself into a dog?" Annie laughed. "But at least I got to have exciting adventures as a dog," he said. "You were a great dog," said Annie. "We liked you as Teddy. What's your real name? If you like it, you can keep calling me Teddy. Or how about Ted?" "Okay, Ted," said Annie. Jack nodded. He was still in shock. "Ted is training to work in my library at Camelot. He has a rare gift for magic," said Morgan. "Cool," said Annie. You helped us a lot, Ted," said Jack, finally finding his voice. "Oh, no. "It was both of you who helped me," said Ted. "You helped break the spell, and I found new stories to take home." "You did?" said Annie. Ted nodded. "The story of the Titanic, the story of the White Buffalo Woman, the story of the Wounded Tiger, and the story of the Rainbow Serpent. I'll write them all down as soon as I get home so people can read them in Morgan's library," he said. "And home is where we must go now, I'm afraid," said Morgan. "Oh, that's too bad," said Annie sadly. "Yeah," said Jack. He was sad too. "I know we'll meet again someday," said Ted. "I hope so," said Jack. "Me too," said Annie. "Bye." She started down the ladder. Jack pulled on his pack. With a heavy heart, he followed. When they got to the ground, they looked up. Morgan and Ted were at the window. They both seemed to glow in the late afternoon light. "The magic treehouse will return for you soon," said Morgan. "I promise." She waved, and they waved back. "Goodbye, Annie. Goodbye, Jack," Morgan called. "Arf," said Ted. In a flutter of time, in a spin of a whirlwind, the magic treehouse was gone. For a moment, Jack and Annie stared at the empty tree. "Ready for dinner?" Annie asked softly. Jack nodded. He felt dazed as they walked silently through the Frog Creek woods. When they came to their street, the sun was just setting. A flock of black birds flew through the silvery pink sky. Annie broke their silence as they headed for their house. "We had great adventures with Ted, didn't we?" "Yeah," Jack said. It was like," he searched for the right words. Like living in dream time," said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack. He smiled. That's exactly what it was like. The Rainbow Serpent. In Aborigine myth, the rainbow serpent not only brings rain, but also helps create the world. At the beginning of time, the rainbow serpent awoke from sleep and pushed through the earth's crust. As it traveled over the empty land, it left behind deep tracks. The rainbow serpent called on the frogs to come out from beneath the earth. It tickled the frogs' bellies, and when they laughed, water poured from their mouths. The water filled the rainbow serpent's tracks, making rivers and lakes. Grass grew. Then all the creatures, birds, lizards, snakes, kangaroos, koalas, and dingoes, woke up and took their places on earth. More facts for you and Jack. Australia is the world's smallest and flattest continent. The country of Australia is the only nation in the whole world to occupy one whole continent. The continent is almost 3 million square miles, or the size of the United States without Alaska and Hawaii. At one time, all the continents on Earth were part of one big landmass. Australia became separated about 200 million years ago. Because it is a separate continent, its animals have evolved differently from those on other continents. 3. Among the animals that live in Australia are 170 different kinds of marsupials, including koalas, wombats, kangaroos, and wallabies, which are like koalas, only smaller. The only marsupials that live outside of Australia are opossums. 4. Kangaroos have been in Australia for 25 million years. For every person in Australia, there are 10 kangaroos. And there are almost 19 million people in Australia. A kangaroo hops at about 11 miles per hour, but it can put on bursts of speed up to 30 miles per hour. Dingoes were used by hunting dogs by the Aborigines. And 6. Koalas feed on gum trees, which are also known as eucalyptus trees. People use the oil of the eucalyptus tree for medicines for colds and flu. Eucalyptus also has a strong smell that many people enjoy. And that's the end of this one. Dingoes at dinner time. Love you guys. Bye-bye.